I'll pass over to Yanni now, who will do a short welcome introduction.
No mai, haere mai katoa, and it is very special to have you come and join us this evening. I'm sure you will learn a lot from the three speakers. So in a fitting way, we begin with a karakia. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa paunamu te moana. Hei huarahi mā tātou i te rangi nei. Aroha atu, aroha mai. Tātou ia tātou katoa. Hui e taiki e. May peace be widespread. May the sea be like living stone, a pathway for us all this day. Let us show respect for each other, for one another, bind us all together. And a whakatoki that I thought was fitting for all the work of TESOL and fitting for our work in schools and for this evening. Kia kaha, kia maya, kia manawa nui. Be strong, be steadfast, be willing. No mai, haere mai, katoa. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Yanni, thank you. So just before we move on to our first group of speakers, I would like to just thank all of the speakers for taking the time out of their busy schedules to come here and share their experiences of this area that many language teachers are, well, in third level, maybe beginning to find themselves working in. I think I'm aware from a comment on Facebook that it's actually an area that some people have been working in for a long time. But I think it's not an area that gets a lot of attention. And I think it's probably an area that's going to be becoming more and more prevalent, this type of collaboration between language specialists and mainstream teachers. So, I'm delighted that these speakers have been willing to come here and share their experiences with us and provide some insights from their experiences. So I'm just going to start off. So our first group of speakers are Karen Salabo, sorry if I pronounced that, I'm not pronounced that correctly, Karen, and Chris Mashlin. And they're going to be talking about a project which they had worked on. And also they had this, I think this is based on a project that was published in the TESOL's journal recently enough. So I'm delighted that they could make the time to join us to talk to this project. So I'm happy, I can stop sharing my screen now, Karen, if you would like to share your.
Thank you, Martin.
I will try and spotlight you as well, sorry.
Okay. There we go. Thanks, Martin and Yanni. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our presentation this evening. Karen and I are going to talk about our journey to support classroom teachers in L-specific pedagogy, which led to the development of a PD cycle delivered by ESOL specialists to the classroom teachers in their own school contexts. This journey started several years ago in the mid-2010s. Across the Kahuiako, we had a growing number of ELLs, and classroom teachers were asking for help from the ESOL teachers at every school. Kahuiako data through the NZCER Wellbeing at School survey was reflecting this increase in teachers wanting support, as well as revealing an increase in these students feeling unsupported also. The Kahuiako responded by providing some teacher-only days with lots on offer, but as an ESOL specialist group, we did a lot of looking at realities and constraints, and then began to work together on identifying, developing, and trialling initiatives that might work in our own contexts. I designed an in-school PD model and trialed it with initial feedback looking promising.
The aims of this PD, it was necessary for us to support the teachers with both strategies for understanding their learners and the needs, but also how to incorporate those into their planning and knowing which strategies might work for which cases. And we wanted to be able to enable the classroom teacher to increase their own knowledge of language and how languages differ, and some of the children's home cultures. That, as Chris said, had been an issue in the NZCER survey, and so we really wanted to make sure that teachers knew ways of connecting with the children's home cultures. We also wanted them to understand the language and teaching principles, particularly those 7 ESOL principles and those inclusive strategies on TKI. And we wanted them to be able to understand the importance of front-loading vocab and explicitly teaching vocab, and of allowing opportunities for oracy, as well as encouraging students to use their home language to scaffold their learning in English. Then they would be able to incorporate all those principles and those strategies within the classroom program to connect those ELLs with the curriculum and to employ them in ways that would benefit all learners, not just the ELLs, but across their classroom. And finally, we wanted to build a better understanding of the alt matrices and to be able to use the data that arises so that the matrices weren't just something you filled in twice a year, but they were something that could inform their teaching, and more recently, the pathway document as well as SELIPs.
So this is the model that I developed, and it follows a gradual release of responsibility philosophy. The model is a scaffolded cycle, which includes modelling, observing, reflecting and future planning with individual teachers. It's run over 4 sessions, but it's prefaced with preparation and capped with a sustain phase, which is not a particular fixed point or session, but is ongoing and involves the teacher's team. Prior to the session's beginning, a folder is readied. We use Google Docs and it's shared with the teacher. This is seen on the left, those several little tiles there, and it includes planning showing connections to the English curriculum, ELL data, which is collated and put into both whole school and class spreadsheets, and that's the little tile at the bottom. A space for notes, support materials like the ALP pathways and TKI links, and any resources created for use in the teaching sessions of stage 1. We also create a timetable for ourselves, the release teacher, as this is done in school time, and the teachers we're working with that term. So this is seen on the right, and you can see time set aside for planning and preparation. There's time for teaching and observing or co-teaching, and classes released and by whom for that term. So everyone has that whole picture. You can also see in yellow and teal highlighting that last minute changes may need to be made, as such as a teacher's life.
Mm-hmm. This is the first actual stage of the model. And in this stage, the ESOL specialist, so Chris or I, in our own schools, would be teaching the teacher's class. It takes about 45 minutes. So we can actually teach 2 classes in a 1.5 hour block, which is standard, I think, fairly standard in a primary school. This step involves us teaching those ELL inclusive tasks or an ELL inclusive lesson within the teacher's own class and within their focus, their shared book or their class topic. And we plan the lesson based on the needs of the ELLs, which we have taken from their ALP data. We have a spreadsheet which we used to manually create, but now if you go onto your ETAP or most of the school management systems, you can download a summary spreadsheet of the ALP data for that class. And in the modelling session, we demonstrate some of those inclusive strategies from TKI and provide opportunities for the children to practice those or for teachers to explicitly teach whatever is needed. And that lesson plan is shared with the teacher in advance. And then during the lesson, we usually photocopy it, or I usually photocopy it, and she can just take notes on what we're doing. So there's a tangible reason for the for reflecting together later. So the second step is when the teacher is released. So that teacher will be released for a full 1.5 hour block. And we're quite adamant that we don't want to do this task, this part of it, after school or at lunchtime. So it's in school time, and we've managed to create release. We'll talk about that later. In this time, we sit down together and we look at the UP data, look at particular children, particular gaps, any trends that there might be across the class, and we explain how we determined which strategies to focus on, or which needs to focus on as well. We link in with pathway document, maybe the literacy learning progressions, New Zealand curriculum. And then also in this session, the teacher shares shares their observations of the children. How did they respond to the strategies? How, what was it that was supporting them? There's a lot of discussion about the needs of those individual Ls at this time, often a bit of a stock take about the support they're getting. Sometimes we might say, look, looks like he needs a little bit more ESOL support, or it looks like he might need some bilingual support. So we do a little bit of reflecting together in that. And then we sit down and we collaboratively plan a lesson similar to what we've done, basically using those same strategies, not necessarily the same strategies, but inclusive strategies, and that's for the teacher to teach. And we'll create the resources together, or I might create some of them later on. And we make sure that it's going to address the needs of their particular ELLs, and that we can scaffold some of those more foundation ELLs up, as well as challenge the native speakers. And if there's any resources, we'll gather them up. So we do ask them what they would like us to focus on in our observations too, both the student needs and how they're implementing those strategies, because the third step is when that teacher is going to teach that lesson.
It's me. For step 3, the classroom teacher now teaches that co-created lesson with their class. We're in the class also, and we observe the ELLs and how well they engage with this inclusive teaching. We take full notes to be able to give feed forward to the teacher as much as possible, and they also support the teaching. Sometimes where needed, maybe a little nudge here and there. It's actually really useful for us to see the Ls in their class context, and it gives us some great insights into what support they really need. This means that we can both guide the teacher more effectively and plan more accurately for those students in our own context. So this step is the second time the classroom teacher is released. We share our observations of the ELLs, and the teacher reflects on the strategies used. This is very useful time for teachers to be able to process and articulate what they felt or noticed, both in terms of the ELLs, but often of the whole class, and how these strategies were able to be applied in some way to all learners. We delve deeper into the ALPs and now the pathways, and we look more closely at CELIP's ESOL principles. We look at the Cummins-Swain framework and TKI ESOL online, trying to find suitable strategies for their classes. We spend time looking at the ELL's ALP data and what areas to focus on in the next few weeks, and then we locate or co-create resources that will be helpful and that the teachers feel confident to trial.
And the number 5 step, the sustain. In this final phase, the teachers now have got a whole new kitty of knowledge. They've observed or they've used various ELL inclusive strategies, gathered resources, they've co-created lessons. The teachers are expected to share this with their teams. So as Chris mentioned earlier, and you can see here, we have an entire folder of the team-wide co-created resources, and they've been worked on by all teachers in that team. We'll attend team meetings in order to support their planning stages of work. Often that might just be at the end of a term to look at the next term's work, or it could be when there's a need. And we gather information for our planning in ESOL at that time too. Personally, I find I have to remind myself to allow time for this stage and to remind the team leaders that I am actually available, because it's a very easy one to slip by, and I think it's probably the most important if you're going to have any valid continuity. I think I might move on from that. Yeah, it's just that shared team planning that's so valuable. And the fact that they are independently incorporating their learnings from the growth cycle down the track, that's what's one of the most rewarding things, is we see that they've actually taken it on board and they're running with it. So the data, the teacher feedback so far, results so far have been really, really positive. There were some, we sent the teachers who were involved in the cycle a survey. So that was about a couple of months ago. And at that point, all of Chris's teachers in her school had done the cycle, and my year's 3-year levels out of 6 had done it. And 81% of the teachers responded. They overwhelmingly found it useful. There was 8 out of 10 that said it was useful for their own learning. 10 out of 10 said the structure was great. It was effective. 9 out of 10 said it was the best ESOL PD that they'd had. And we do a lot of staff meetings and other such things, but this was well beyond that. We are seeing those strategies being used in the classes. We're seeing them being shared across the team. And subsequent to writing the TESOL ANZ article, we've undertaken more rigorous feedback across both of our schools, giving us some more quantitative data. Includes interviewing some of the teachers who had completed the survey, and we've gathered some student data which before and after the intervention to see what sort of changes were made.
We've developed a teacher rubric for teachers to self-guide their practice against for use in our kahuiako. We don't expect you to read it on this slide, but it's just to give you an idea. But it includes indicators at beginning, proficient and advanced, such as knowing the learner, front-loading vocabulary, development of oracy and ELL inclusive tasks, implementation of the ELP pathways and matrices, use of the ministry's ESOL resources, and a reminder of the ESOL principles. The kahuiako principles are considering that this could be incorporated into schools' professional learning and development or growth cycles. There are a total of 8 areas we're focusing on, and teachers may feel that these different areas that they're at beginning, proficient or advanced stages. We're currently using it in our second iteration of the PD, which is now in my school, a one-off release session to follow up after more than a year without direct support from me. Teachers are self-assessing against this, and we use this to guide our follow-up session. We believe there's some essential elements to this becoming embedded, including the fact that the ESOL teacher has a relationship with the teachers, ELLs and leadership, and isn't an external facilitator. It utilises expertise already in the school. They're always on site and advocating for teachers to become comfortable with the pedagogy and practices needed for teaching ELLs. Also needed is a common understanding across all teams of how to effectively provide for ELLs using many of the strategies and considering the ESOL principles. A shared vision across all staff is required, as individual teachers alone can't carry this forward, but being the way we plan for our learners is more powerful and starts to become embedded. Leadership support is key, and all leaders need to support this focus, as well as giving time and space in team meetings for sharing new learning and planning together.
So yes, there have been challenges. The cycle takes time. It takes time out of our ESOL timetable time. And I know Chris timetables herself some time to actually work on those plans, which I think is an excellent idea. The ESOL specialists in our kahuiako have been exploring different ways of organising release for the teachers. So as across school leaders, Chris and I have an extra teacher who works with us. So we have 2 days a week for across school work, and we have another teacher in our ESOL department for those 2 days. And that means we can timetable it so that that teacher goes and releases the class while the teacher works with us. But one of the other schools in our kahuiako is looking at having a reliever for 1 day a week. And that reliever will just be coming in to do the release for the cycle. So there are ways around it, but ideally you wouldn't be doing it after school. There's some need to be flexible too, because a teacher might be absent. We try to keep to the organised timetabling as much as possible, but it's not always, and it does get difficult to reschedule. But we have we've got a designated shared team drive and shared ESOL drive, and it just makes it more usable, that we can actually go in and see what's happening in the teams. They can look at what's happening in ESOL, and it makes it a lot easier to be in sync with each other. So our next steps, we have so far had 2 full-day workshops with the ESOL specialists, which has been fantastic. We've all just released ourselves, or principals have agreed to release us. And Chris and I have run through the model with the teachers and work out how they sort of workshopping how to use it in their own school, how to adapt it and incorporate it. There are 2 new ESOL specialists in our kahuiako, so we'll have to give them some additional support. And as Chris mentioned, her school is now at phase 2. So she can work to embed and really sustain that learning with all of those teachers, and also take any new teachers who arrive through the whole cycle. Another one is our secondary school. They haven't been involved previously, but we're talking about ways that they can incorporate it as well with subject teachers and building strategies for working with ELLs. And we do plan next year to work with them a lot more closely. So thank you for your time and attention, and you can read the article. There's a link on here, and our emails are there if you have any questions, but we're a bit excited to do the dive deep later on as well.
Thank you so much, Karen and Chris, for that, for sharing that work you've been doing. It sounds really amazing and really impactful. So I'm definitely sure people will have a lot more questions, maybe in the follow-up dive deep session, which I'll talk about at the end of this. But if you do have questions at the moment, feel free to add those to the chat. I'm just kind of aware of the time, so I might hand over to maybe to Yanni to briefly introduce Albi. Would that be okay, Yanni? Yanni's here.
Yes, I'm here. I turned off my mic. Kia ora and talofa, LB. LB Stevenson from Tamaki College, who is an amazingly gentle giant leader in the English department, who has been a major in the initiative leadership of across curriculum implementation of a focus on literacy. So LB, welcome from a very full and busy day. He's been busy up to 7 o'clock tonight with responding to parents and students in what we're calling a speed dating session. So over to you, LB, to give the participants an insight into the work that's been going on at Tamaki College. Kia ora.
Thank you, Yanni. Hello, everyone. I firstly just want to introduce myself, but before I do that, I just want to thank Yanni and Martin for this opportunity to share. I'm really nervous about this, and I'm just looking at everyone going, it just looks like experienced teachers here, and I just feel like this little newbie coming on board. So please bear with me tonight. I think I came in halfway through Chris's presentation, and I just looked at it going, oh my gosh, This looks amazing. But I'm going to share with you, and I'm going to speak from the heart with what we've been doing here at Tamaki College. But before we do that, a little bit about me. I'm a teacher here at Tamaki College in Glen Innes in Auckland. I've been teaching for 13 years, and I'm a teacher of English. The last 3 or 4 years, I have been co-HOD and just recently full-time HOD of the English department. And over the last 2 years, we've been working on putting together a literacy project as a response to the literacy changes that are happening to NCEA and the new literacy standards that are getting introduced. And so I've been doing this work with Dr. Yani and with the team, and I'm going to share our journey with you guys and where we're at. It's a journey, so we haven't quite reached the finish line yet, but I want to share with you what we've got so far. So I'm going to share the screen. And I hope, can you guys see the presentation? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So the literacy project at Tamaki College started in 2021. And our principal, Mrs. Pamaka, called on all the people that are connected to literacy at the college. So our literacy experts, our language experts, the English department as well, to come on board, to come together and figure out what can we do to support the literacy needs of our students in readiness for the changes that are happening. And so we put our heads together for the last part of 2021, sort of figuring out where are we at, what's our current practice, and where do we want to go? What can we do? And when we were reflecting and talking about where we were at, I think a big thing for all of the subject areas is that everyone has an important role to play when it comes to literacy. At colleges, you know, literacy is typically seen as something that is driven by or belongs to the English department. And in my experience, you know, we are seen as the ones who are responsible for driving these literacy initiatives. But when we were reflecting, we felt that everyone has an important role to play in developing better literacy strategies and delivering better literacy strategies to our students. So literacy at Tamaki College it's sort of across the subject areas, of course, in English, in EL, mathematics, science, social sciences. It's everywhere: PE, arts, performing arts, technology, and learning languages. And so this literacy project, we knew that we had to get all of our key stakeholders on board. So at the moment, what does literacy look like at our school is that there's a whole lot of testing that our year 9s and year 10 students do. There's formative literacy assessments as well. And then of course for our senior students, there are literacy assessments for both NCEA level 1, 2 and 3. And then we've got literacy support from our literacy experts and Dr. Yani, but as well as Mr. Milford. And so, yeah, this is what we're currently doing. And we know that there's so much more that we can do to support our students. So when we were at the beginning stages of putting this project together, we needed to figure out what is the whole point of it? What is our why? And the why is we wanted to focus on supporting the literacy needs for our junior students and readiness for NCEA and the new changes. And that literacy was also a priority school-wide. It didn't just belong to one area. Yani, I'm looking at you and I'm thinking if there's something that I'm missing, please jump in, Yani.
No, you're going super well.
Thanks. Our focus group is our current year 9 cohort. And we want to sort of follow through this journey with them right up into level 1. And so our literacy project is made up, or it's made up of 4 key features. And these key features are the core conditions of success from the Ministry of Education. You probably know this stuff already. So kaiako pedagogy, data use and management, akonga action plan, and then of course whānau, iwi, and community engagement. At the moment, we are working on kaiako pedagogy, and we're hoping to move into data use and management and akonga action plans and whānau and iwi and community engagement. But I think what I've learned so far in our journey is that the most important part of making sure that this initiative is driven well is that everything starts with the teacher, with the kaiako. And so there's a huge mindset that needs to shift here at our school, at our kura. And so getting us all on the same page with literacy has been a journey. And that's something that's sort of taking time. And so, but I think it's all good, you know, for things to take time, especially with our kaiako. So with kaiako pedagogy, I guess the heart of that, of what we want to do with that is to get our teachers to reflect on, in their subject areas, what is the current literacy practice? And then, you know, what do you want to prioritize going forward? With literacy. So it's a lot of reflection, it's a lot of looking in the mirror, and then it's a lot of hoping and dreaming. You know, what do you want to do? How do you want to explore literacy in digital technology or in music? So this is where we're currently at in our journey, kaiako pedagogy. We have made some start with data use and management, and so we're getting. The goal is to get different members from each department or subject area to work with our numbers guy who crunches all the data, so that they could understand and use the literacy data in a powerful and meaningful way in their subject area. Because at the moment, they just see the numbers, they just see the levels, and they don't really know how that translates to their subject area. So it just sort of sits there. So this part is about using the data in a way that will empower them as kaiako, but also ultimately empower the students. And we plan and we deliver something that's specific to them and their needs. Akonga focus action plan. So it's, you know, knowing your learner. This is the stuff that we think about every day as teachers, and thinking about how we will support them. We haven't quite got to this part in our literacy journey, but I feel like this is something that's going to kick into gear early next year.
What can we do right now?
We have had some traction with whānau, iwi, and community engagement, bringing awareness to families and the community about the literacy strategy, but also providing opportunities for our whānau to engage with literacy. And I don't know if Yanni, you wanted to talk about that with the surveys and stuff.
We have done over the ending of 2021 an extensive survey of our community, asking them about 3 areas of the way Tamaki College has a role in our community. And one of those lenses that we asked them to give responses about was literacy. And so that project meant that we had, I think, 151 respondees from our school community largely, who with some detail of how you might explain and view the literacies of 2022 and beyond, their thoughts and their needs and their requests. So as a result of that synthesis, one major outcome or part of the synthesis was a request for the provision of day-to-day literacy, and particularly for those who are struggling with literacy as a new language, but their comments do not require or don't wish to then have courses per se, but they would like to have a much more fluid and responsive, flexible possibility of participating in literacy as adults to then support the literacy as a family. And so that's quite exciting work that's getting off the ground in our community, with the Tamaki College taking a core role in leadership there.
Thank you, Yanni. Thank you, Yanni. So yeah, there's been some cool movement there, and I think before I continue, we had a plan to sort of really get this into full gear, but we had a lot of things sort of interrupt our plans, and so it's made me think about you know, the pace that we're working at and focusing on our kaiako pedagogy has been quite valuable for us, and I'm quite happy where we're at. And I like that we're focusing on the teachers first and where they're at and supporting where they want to go. I wanted to talk a little bit about the English department and how we have started our journey as a department through the literacy project, and some of the things that we've put into place in terms of kaiako pedagogy, data use and management, and our akunga action plan, and we haven't yet. So this is what we've done so far. So this is the English department here at Tamaki College. It's a diverse team, and I think the first step that we took with kaiako pedagogy was we did a self-reflection, and we spent a week sort of sifting through and scrutinizing everything literacy related as a department. So looking at our current practice, what are we doing? And then what we felt was working well for our kids and for ourselves, but then also talking about what we thought wasn't working well. And so that process was guided by a Ministry of Education reflection document. And to be honest, it was a little, it was confronting, because you're having to question and sort of scrutinize yourself as a teacher. We do that anyway, we reflect, but it was a good experience because we were able to really look at what we were doing. And what I liked about that was that we were able to talk about what we wanted to do. So what were our hopes and our dreams? So this here was an example of the kaiako review. And it was really cool to reflect and review on everything, but to also look at the opportunities and what we wanted to do next. One of the things that we thought we could do better was integrate and use our literacy experts in our school in a better way. And what we did with our year 9s in term 2 and in term 3 is that we, instead of just doing one-off literacy lessons and ticking a box, we actually changed our entire planning for term 2 and term 3, and had these intensive classes with both Dr. Yanni and with our other literacy expert, Mark Milford. And Dr. Yanni and Mark Milford would come to our year 9 classes. They would spend about 3 to 4 weeks doing these intensive programs, whether it was a reading skills program or how to craft a text program with Dr. Yanni. And that time was really valuable for the kids, because they were able to deep dive into reading and writing literacy strategies. It wasn't just a one-off thing that we were doing. There was a process to it. It was a journey. And it was a really meaningful experience for the teachers. For some of us, it was humbling, because we put ourselves aside and we became the learners. And I think, I don't know about you guys and what it's like at your schools, but I know at high schools, we can sort of get lost in our little silos and feel like we are the experts. So it's humbling when someone else comes into your space to teach your kids, but it was a good thing for us, and we were really open to it. And I think because we were open to it, the kids enjoyed the experience, because we were sitting with them while Dr. Yanni and Mark came in. And so with the crafted writing program, I'm just going to show you an example of some of the success that we experienced by prioritizing literacy and by reflecting on it. So Dr. Yanni came, sorry guys, I feel like I'm like all over the place, so I'm going to try and stick to the program. So Dr. Yanni came in and did the crafted writing program with my year 9 class, and we can see here in term 1, before we did the crafted writing program, this student A, when he did his Astor writing, you know, we had to get him to do it twice because he just didn't write that much and there wasn't that much to mark or assess. In term 2, after we finished the crafted writing program, they had like midterm exams or something, and part of the exams was the Astor writing test, and this was what he was able to produce after having that intensive literacy focus in class with Dr. Yanni. And you can see that there's a huge difference. And as a department, we knew that that our thinking, our planning had to change, and what we were currently doing what we were used to and comfortable with wasn't working. And so this has been a huge blessing, and that's why I feel like you know, taking our time with Kayako pedagogy has been so helpful for our department, and I think it's been helpful for all the other departments as well, because we are truly sifting through everything and trying to find what is going to work.
I'm really sorry, Albie. Sorry about this. I think we might have to, just because of the time. I think there's so much to go through. I think we're just are you okay if we finish your section just here, if that's okay?
Of course.
So I'm really sorry, but
no, we're going to leave on a high. So this is the good stuff. Okay?
So leave on a high, leave with success.
Yeah.
But
no worries, Martin.
No, thank you. It's been a really, really interesting talk, and I think lots of really interesting themes coming out of what you said, which I really hope we can pick up again at a later stage. It just goes to show there's so much meat in this topic, but I'm just aware of the time, and I feel we do need to move on to our final speakers. But thank you so much, Albie, for that. That was fantastic. For you, fantastic for me to hear about the experience in your school and what you've been doing. It's been amazing.
Martin, if I could just make a comment that if you are interested in a deep dive with LB at a later time, there's much else that LB has on this slide deck, and in particular I think you'll find it interesting too, because LB has led other across the different departments to reflect on those first alerts that LB showed, and I think you'll be interested in what their reflection on their current practices are and where they think they might like to particularly put new emphasis or re-emphasize. So if you want to get those kind of insights into the workings of the journey at Tamaki College, then please come to the next session with LB.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, LB. Just one thing, Martin.
Yeah.
LB, I think, needs to move home. He hasn't been home since the crack of dawn. So LB,
no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, they had to lock up.
Oh yeah.
Sorry.
Just amazingly present with us today, LB. Thank you all this evening, and thank you so
everyone. God bless. Have a good night.
Drive carefully and go well.
Bye.
So now I'll hand over to Lucy and Mark from AUT. It might go on. Feel free to go take Lucy and Mark. Feel free to take up to the 15 minutes if it goes on a bit extra. I'm aware other people maybe the time, but if you need the full 15 minutes, don't feel rushed to just finish. So, but apologies about the time, my time management. Sorry.
That's been interesting to hear what other people are doing. Thank you. All right, I'll share my screen. People seeing my slides, or should I try again?
Try again, Mark.
Yep, let's try that again.
So we can see that, just not in slideshow mode yet. Ah, there you go.
There we are. Very good. All right. Well, kia ora koutou and good evening, everyone. Lucy and I are delighted to have this time to talk a little bit about collaborative steps that enable academic literacy teaching to be targeted to specific assessments in tertiary courses. We'll focus on how learning advisors, as literacy specialists like us, work with lecturers who are subject specialists. We'll do that by just giving you a quick overview of our context and a key challenge we face in teaching academic literacy. We'll then discuss our collaborative design process that identifies academic literacy teaching points that students need to know and then show you a sample of how we've taught one reading strategy that contributes to students being able to successfully write a blog critique assessment. Before we'll finish, we'll also outline the broader context and key issues that this work is part of. And we'd be happy to discuss those sorts of things in a future session. So with our context, we're at AUT as part of a centralized team, and we're 10 full-time equivalent learning advisors. And we draw on a number of backgrounds and expertise, including education, English literature, applied linguistics, and learning design. And part of our challenge lies in attempting to teach academic literacy knowledge that enables students to be successful in faculty designed assessment tasks. And that occurs without the use of any processes for diagnosing what students already know, and typically also without any input into the design of assessments from literacy specialists. And this tends to result in uneven, unrealistic, and hidden literacy demands. And there are constraints on how much teaching time we may have. Often it's somewhere between 30 and 90 minutes over a semester with a cohort. And our team of 10 do this across 5 faculties. And that brings us to the point that academic literacy, and I think this is something that everyone has said something similar to so far, it's not for some, but for all students. And we're in alignment with this definition from Ursula Wingate in defining academic literacy as discipline-specific ways of reading, evaluating information, as well as presenting, debating, and creating knowledge through both speaking and writing, as well as through other multimodal resources. With this in mind, academic literacy development is not separate from or extra to the curriculum. It's a core and ongoing element of it that is inseparable from learning disciplinary knowledge. And this brings us to our challenge. Unfortunately, university investment in academic literacy development is typically low. At AUT, there's one learning advisor for every 2,696 students. When we consider that each student may be studying 4 courses a semester, commonly with 2 assessment tasks per course, then we're looking at around 21,600 pieces of submitted work that each learning advisor could be involved with over 12 weeks. Lovely. It's easy to see why individualized teaching for all those students who want to lift their grades or those who might be at risk of failing is just simply not possible. And while we thought we had a mountain to climb, colleagues elsewhere have even more students. And this points to the seemingly insurmountable problem of equitably and effectively providing academic literacy development for all students. So our response has been to, excuse me. Excuse me for a second. So yeah, our response has been to try to reach the student cohort by embedding academic literacy development. And this is taught during timetabled lectures and or tutorials. And in our practice, this gets complemented with online resources that are available to students within their courses in the learning management system. And the aim is to try to anticipate what students need to draw on and develop for their assessments. In so doing, we're targeting what students have to do. And for this to work in practice, we're looking at interdisciplinary collaborations between learning advisors who know about text analysis and literacy pedagogy, and lecturers who know about their disciplines and their students. This shared focus is on the assessment tasks that lecturers require their students to complete. So according to the research we've done into our own practices, we can articulate 10 steps for collaboration. Initially, the learning advisor reads over the assessment task instructions and assessment rubrics to familiarize themselves with the task. The learning advisor then discusses this with the lecturer and asks the lecturer what challenges students have had in the past when they've tried to do this assessment. The lecturer will then source some samples of student writing from previous cohorts with the student's permission. The learning advisor then analyzes these to identify recurrent features and create model texts for use in teaching. Ongoing discussion with the lecturer then informs the learning advisor's development of a teaching and learning sequence. After receiving and integrating feedback from the lecturer and learning advisor then finalize the teaching materials as well as their respective roles when they are going to team teach during the lecture. After that, they meet to review what was taught and refine that as required. And they integrate any changes into the development of some online material. And as part of our research, we found that the second and third steps are the ones that are crucial to designing and teaching academic literacy that targets what students need to do. In fact, we really love this quote about co-responsibility and making explicit what it so often is invisible. Over to you, Lucy.
Thanks, Mark. So with the goal of explicit teaching in mind, in our context, it's really common to use modelling as a strategy, so for text structure and modelling features. Today, I'm not going to talk a lot about modelling, but I do want to give you a sense of what a blog critique is in the context of a second-year assessment task for the Bachelor of Education. So when we analyse some high-scoring texts, they often had 3 parts. Or if you're into genre theory, there are actually 3 distinct genres, and they had particular functions. So the first part commonly was focusing on what the blog post was about. Have a little glimpse here. Then the second part would be about interpreting the main message of the blog post, particularly the point of view of the blog author. And then there'd be this shift to the student's own point of view, a personal response. And you can see there a little bit integrated with literature. So basically, students needed some kind of structure in their blog critique so as not to get tangled. And by tangled, I mean the examples of classroom practice and the theoretical concepts, and also the points of view, needing to organise it so these aspects were clear. But the whole critique itself is anchored in the content of the blog post. So in simple terms, you've got to extract the right stuff from the blog post in order to then critique and write about it. And in our ongoing discussions with the lecturer, he was really pointing to the fact that actually students were saying, hang on, these blog posts, they're not easy to read. And one of the challenges seemed to be around the details in the blog about what was happening in the classroom, what the teacher's doing and students doing. They had to somehow relate that in the blog to the theoretical concepts. And one reason then why that's not so straightforward is that reading the blog post is a bit like reading a flow of consciousness. And the lecture actually reflected, hang on, a blog post is in many ways harder to read than, say, a textbook chapter, because the chapter is highly organized and structured, but the blog post might not be. So what does that mean for us? Oh, it meant we're thinking, well, we need a way to help students organize the content from the blog post and connect it to their reading. So one teaching point for us, thanks, Mark, is about, we thought, well, let's zoom in on this idea of helping them organize concepts. We simply called it an ideas map. Linguistically, we're looking at a taxonomy of classification, but the gist is an organization of concepts from more general to more specific. And I'd love to show you a little glimpse of a teaching point around this, something in the classroom. And we'd love to hear from you if, as you explain it, if you think, oh, I actually do something similar, I have an alternate means of teaching the same thing, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you. So in the classroom, we would actually take an example of a blog post like this one. Just take that in for a moment. And we guided them to look at headings and initial sentences to see, is there anything there that can tell us the main, most general idea? And then go hunting for specific details, anything concrete about what students were doing, teachers were doing in the classroom, tangible activity. And then actually, Mark, if you just go back one, thanks. Thank you. And so if you look at that there with what's highlighted, we then needed to discuss, well, hang on, what's missing? What's not in the blog? And it's the intermediate organization. So we don't really know yet, say, what the behavior chart or the praise from parents is actually about. So filling in the gaps there, we can say, okay, those two things are types of what? Extrinsic rewards, okay? That can be differentiated from intrinsic and so on. So this kind of organization of concepts, this mapping can be done at either end. There's kind of no recipe here, but we needed to discuss with students that all they need for writing might not be there. And so they need to extract what they could and then go to their textbook chapters and their readings to relate the concepts to the examples in the blog. So we showed them one, and then they had, you know, teach it, try it is kind of our mantra, gave them a new blog post. Have a look at that one for a moment. So a different post, but they got hands-on and in the class time, they could create their own maps, they could do it interactively and discuss it with the teacher and students. And in this case, we've got a similar issue going on, right? If you're looking at the red detail there, there's nothing really in the blog that tells you what that detail relates to. And in this case, we could relate those details to a concept like self-regulation. So in class, the students try the mapping, and the benefit of that, students are there, the teacher's there. If they can't see a connection or they're a bit wobbly about what something means, it can be revisited, and students can be directed to readings where the content is available for them. So with this glimpse that we've just shown you, we're aiming here to get behind the scenes of the writing. So sure, we can show models and we can visualize the end product and we can discuss that and do that interactively. But what do you have to do before then? What's behind the kind of how steps? And we focused on one vital aspect, which is organizing the concepts from your readings. In terms of impact, just showing resubmission rates here, you can see before our collaboration in 2016, about 7.4%, dropping to 3.1% in 2020. Noting that around 2019, that's when we started to use the lecturer knowledge of how the cohorts have been tracking and the issues and focus on the reading. We also made mini videos available of all the content from teaching that could be accessed in the LMS. We also have findings then about the lecture experiences, but actually just before I flick to that, you know, the resubmission rates, why are they a big deal? In programs like the Bachelor of Education, students have to pass every single course. And so it's a lecturer's responsibility to try and get everyone over the line. They have to pass everything to get through the program. So any shift like that is a really big deal for the lecturers, a reduction in their workload. And what do they have to say about it? Here's one of our favorite quotes. I'll just read this with you. So the lecturer's reflecting, she says, when you see somebody, like a learning advisor, start to unpack your assignment, you think, bloody hell, that's complicated. Often we add another bit because the students didn't get that bit. So we'll write another 3 sentences of explanation. And by the end of it, 3 years down the track, it's like this huge beast of a thing. Okay, the beast is the assessment task descriptions. And so I do support. I go back to, what am I actually asking? What are the clearest ways to unpack this for the students? And she goes on to reflect, the knowledge of the processes around doing the assessment is held by the learning advisor, and the knowledge of the content is held by the lecturer. And that's woven together to produce something that is stunning for the students. So drawing attention to these comments, because again, it's emphasizing the importance of 2 complementary knowledge bases working together in order to create something that's targeted. And we have a lot more in our published article. You can use this QR code to access it. And I believe Mark is going to put the link in chat. And while he does that, I'd like to acknowledge our other co-researchers, Vanessa Vanderham, and from the School of Education, John Mill and Chris Jenkin. And feel free, please, to contact us directly for any follow-up chats. And in terms of what happens next, thanks, Mark. Yeah, we'd love to hear any particular questions. I think Jan is going to facilitate those in a moment. And I've just also listed there other related topics to embedding academic literacy. Just have a little scan of those, because if any of those are particularly of interest to you, we can talk about them in a follow-up session or a new session at another time. So thank you very much for having the evening with us, and over to Yanni, I believe. Thank you.
I'll just speak to you, Martin. We are running out of time, and so I wonder whether, as tempting as it is to now move into a short Q&A time, whether we leave it here and just simply invite everyone to keep their eyes open for a deeper session with each of the presenters. Of their choice.
Yeah, I think that is a good point. We are a bit over time, and I think that's just an indication of just how much is in this topic and all of the different aspects. And I think, as Lucy pointed out there at the end, you know, when she listed all the different areas that are involved in this, and I think it is a huge area. So we will go through, sorry, I'm just going to take this link out. We will go through the comments in questions in the chat, and also I might ask people to share their ideas on this. I didn't copy that. This Google form as well. If you intend to come to this the follow-up dive deep session, you can indicate on this form. So I'll just try and make this work. What kind of specific areas or questions about this topic you might, from any of the areas from this discussion, you might be interested in knowing more about. And as we said before, it is a huge area. So I think the committee are going to have to think about what's the best way to organize this, whether it's by, you know, I think maybe there isn't, I think 1 hour per, you know, divided among 3 groups probably isn't enough. I think there's a huge amount here. And so if there's appetite, we'll be looking at how we can best do follow-up sessions about this topic, at this area, where people hopefully can have a bit more interaction and a bit more Q&A about these, what the presenters have talked about today and touched on. we provisionally have a date for the 9th of November at 7 p.m, so Wednesday at 7 p.m, but we will follow up with more details when we've got things confirmed. Other than that, I would really like to thank the speakers for giving up their time tonight to share the great work that they're doing in this area. I mean, when you think about what's involved and the size of it, it's really, really quite impressive what people are doing and the inroads that people are making with the ultimate goal of improving the student learning experience, and so improving so that they're empowered to engage more within their academic life, but also in general. I'd also like to thank committee members, in particular Yanni, for playing a very pivotal role in helping to organize some of the speakers and to come tonight to this event. And I'd also then finally just like to thank all of the members for joining. It's great to see such a big turnout tonight, and so we're delighted that so many of you were able to make it.